Hey, hi, everyone tuning in. My name's Christian Rodriguez. This that you're listening to is called the Art of Human Podcast. This particular podcast is number 86 out of the 85 that came before. That makes this one 86. 86, if you were to put it on paper, and you were to put a dash for every one, then you would have 86 dashes. So try to visualize that in your mind. There's been 86 episodes. That's 86 dashes on a piece of paper. That'd be quite a bit. So I'm going to give myself a pat on the shoulder. 86 podcast. This is the one that you're about to listen to. Today, it should be the 14th. It is 11:42 p.m. as I record this introduction. The actual podcast that you're about to listen to was recorded actually about a couple weeks ago. I can't tell you the exact... Well, I can tell you the exact day, actually. I just don't think it's that important. It was like a week and a half ago I recorded this podcast that you guys are about to listen to. I just want to give a shout out to you who's listening. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to me and to give me the opportunity to have your attention. And I'm hoping that you can get benefit, from this. And I also hope that one day, possibly, this podcast can be a way in which I could make revenue, and that possibility is only possible with people listening to the podcast. So thank you. I'm not making money off of this right now, but there's a possibility that one day that will happen. And in the process of manifesting that, this is it right here. This is part of that process. And regardless, I think the most important thing always is you guys, the listeners. And I also think it's important for me to do this in an authentic and fun way so that we can mutually benefit from one another. Because I think regardless of what I were to say on any of these podcasts, the only thing that really matters is the type of energy that I give you guys and how honest I can be. Because how can I talk about life? How can I talk about anything while being a contradiction in the sense of not being myself and just being something else? So I'm here to give you guys everything that is me. And so I hope you enjoy this podcast. And if you do listen to it, feel free to send me a DM on Instagram at TAOH podcast. Let's get it in. And not like that, I'm not saying get it in like, not that frictional type of thing that makes, the human race be able to populate. I'm saying let's get it in, like let's get in this podcast. So let's get it in together. Let's get it in. I'm just kidding. All right, hold up. I'm trying to start this. I got a new watch and I'm about to start a timer. All right, so the 20-minute flow state conversation has officially begun. Once the 20 minutes is up, I'm done, and I'm going to be conscious of the every second ticking down, so when I need to wrap it up, I'll wrap it up. So, flow state, guys. The reason I even spoke about this, like as my very first podcast in December of 2019, was because flow state was something that really, really interested me. I'm sure many of you guys, or anybody who may have listened to this podcast, I've mentioned many occasions how I've been in pursuit of my own happiness since like November of 2019. I went to a park and I wrote it in my journal that every day moving forward I pursue my own happiness. And that was in November 2019, and that's kind of what started this. The podcast had already started before, like the brainstorming of the podcast had already started before November 2019. But this podcast has been a part of that journey. Man, I gotta I got a lot of breathing I got to do during this podcast. It's been a while since I've talked to like people, and I know there's nobody here with me, but I'm talking to an audience, which is whomever may listen to this, which I do think a few people will listen. So, and so flow state was an interesting topic for me. You know, I was around the time that I really started to look into flow state and learn about flow state. You know, I think by then my brother had already maybe lent me the book, The Genie Within, and I started learning about the subconscious mind. And I think I had already maybe read a little bit of the Tao Te Ching, which if you haven't heard of that book, it's really amazing. So I was already kind of getting into this, like getting into these different spiritual subjects. I was kind of learning about spirituality. I was kind of learning about the mind. I was learning about, you know, some of these things that help for self-improvement and things like that from different books that I started reading. And I'm still a big fan of Bruce Lee, but, you know, around that time I was really into Bruce Lee, or I was spending a lot of time just watching videos on him. And Bruce Lee's, he's a martial artist. And so the idea of flow state kind of went into that. And actually, and I know I'm using like 3 minutes already I haven't really even talked about flow state yet, but I'm here building some context for you guys. Actually, I think the person who really, really first got me interested into the idea of flow state was this guy, Firas Zahabi. He came out on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I heard him talk about it. And I love that I'm actually going back and thinking about how this all started, because it's going to start this really well, I feel like. He started mentioning about flow state and how, like, you know, this guy, Firas Zahabi, he is, well, I think he still is, maybe, I don't know, but at that time when he was on Joe Rogan's podcast, he was like a trainer, like the owner of this jiu-jitsu, I think it was MMA or jiu-jitsu academy in Canada. And so he started talking about how he kind of, his training philosophy in a way is flow state. And so the way he kind of explained it, and I'll briefly explain it to you guys because this is how I was, like, in a way introduced to it, was that, you know, flow state is like, hey, like, I guess the idea of flow, this isn't really flow state what I'm about to explain, but it's kind of like flow training, you know, under this context of like training. He mentioned, like, you know, today I do let's say for instance, like 5 push-ups is my absolute max push-ups, right? Let's just use myself. Let's say right now I got on the ground and I did as many push-ups as I can, and 5 was my max. Then he said, well, if 5 is your maximum, I only want you to do 1. Like today I would only do 1. Tomorrow I would only do 1. And for like 5 days I would only do 1. And essentially I would only do 1 push-up until 1 push-up became insanely easy. Like it was just so easy, I'm not sore from it, nothing. Then I would increase to 2 push-ups, and then I'll do 2 push-ups long enough to the point where it was basically effortless, and then I would increase to 3, 4, right? And then, so that was kind of his idea of like flow training. It was this very slow and steady progression type of method, you could say. And I fell in love with everything he was talking about. And that was only, I mean, I'm pretty sure he talked about it in a little bit more depth. I remember him mentioning, like, you should never be sore. Like, you should exercise and just never be sore, because you kind of abide by that kind of, I'm just going to say, a principle or whatever you want to call it, of just doing a fraction of what would be your all out, just a fraction of what would be your all out. And you do it continuously until that becomes easy. And then you increase just slow and steady. It's a super slow and steady progression. And I fell in love with him talking about it, because for me, in my running career, and if people don't know, I ran collegiately for 5 years and then competed in high school for 3 years and then competed for 2 cross-country seasons in middle school. So I have about a decade worth of like running experience, long distance running to be specific. And I had a lot of injuries, in particular in like my 5 years of college. And I felt like it was because I was, now in retrospect, I know there's so many things that was like in hindsight or retrospect, whatever you want to call it, like by me now reflecting back in that time, it's so obvious why I got the injuries. But give me 1 sec. It's so obvious why I was injured at that time. But not to go into too much of that, all I can say is really that this kind of flow state principle, if I would have actually applied that during my time in college, then I would not have gotten injuries. Yeah, okay. And so Firas Zahabi and him kind of explaining these principles and talking about flow, that really got me interested. And I actually even bought a book called Flow. It's actually like right over there. It's called Flow, and it's by like this author. His name is like Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, like it's got a bunch of like syllables and Z's and things, and it's kind of difficult for me to pronounce. But he was, I'm so sorry. Someone knocked on my door and that kind of threw me off. So then, yeah, I even got that book about flow state, and it's called like Optimal Experience. And if I just kind of had to go off the cuff and explain flow state through my own experience and my own words, I would say it's this point, it's this experience in life that you can have, and I would say just about everybody has been in the flow state. It's a moment where you're so immersed in the activity that you are doing that you essentially, like what you would consider yourself, like it essentially vanishes, is no longer existent, because you have essentially like blended yourself with everything around you. You're so immersed in what you're doing that quite literally like nothing exists except what it is that you're immersed in. When you're in the flow state, your perception of time is different than when you're not in the flow state. When you're in the flow state, 20 minutes can feel like 1 minute. 1 hour can feel like 5 minutes. I mean, those are some of the principles those are some of the characteristics of being in the flow state. And I think what also interested me in flow state was because I understood that flow state had to do with like athletic performance. Like if you were able to get into the flow during an exercise, then I knew that was like a good thing, because when you're in the flow, everything's effortless. So essentially everything's functioning at its most optimal potential. And because I've always been somebody who loves exercise and movement, then that was something that just naturally interested me. And I've always been interested in like, I feel like I've just always been interested in things of that sort. And I'm sure that's kind of maybe obvious to some of you, like from this podcast. So we got 9 minutes and 20. I thought these 20 minutes were gonna fly by. I used to do these podcasts so different. Now I'm a lot more now compared to before. I'm much more present, which means that like every second is so heavy for me now. And I say that like a really good thing. Like I'm really grounded, and so I'm not just kind of on a tangent. I'm not like like, you know, I'm a lot more just like present. So every second's like a lot more heavy. And because I don't have anything like written down, I'm really just improvising. And frankly, it's a little bit uncomfortable to do this as well. But thank you for being here with me, guys. I hope you're getting some sort of value from what I'm talking about. And let's get back into it. I think when I did that first podcast, I mentioned about like what are some of the benefits of flow state. And of course, this is my opinion. And before I even get into like what's the benefit of flow state, I think I should probably kind of continue on like what actually allows us to get into the flow state. And I'm gonna kind of go into it from a perspective of like just my own experience, but also like things that I've read, and like it seems to be like true across the board for like everybody. Parameters. That's probably the first thing I should mention, and probably like literally it's between that and one other thing that's like the most important thing for the flow state, to be in the flow state. So parameters is so important because parameters in a way dictates the skill level and the intensity that you will need in order to accomplish that task, in order to accomplish a task. And when we're talking about the flow state, I think we have to set the foundation that in order to get into a state of flow, there needs to be some sort of task. You know what I'm saying? Like you're not going to get into the flow state while being panicky and not knowing what's going on. Like when you go into the flow state, it's because you're trying to accomplish something. I think from my experience and everything, that's kind of one of the parameters. Like even if it's like me being at a party and I'm dancing and I get into the flow state while dancing, well, there's still like the task of like me dancing and having fun. So I'm not saying it has to be a task where like it's like I got a to-do list and I'm going through all these tasks. Like I'm just saying there has to be something that you're doing and there's like a purpose to it. You know, even if it's just dancing, even if it's just washing the dishes, even if it's just you, basically anything. But, you know, you have to be, it's a task, right? So I think that's the foundation to flow. There needs to be some sort of focus on something. You're focusing on something. And now, going back to parameters is necessary because the parameters that you set for this task are going to dictate how hard it is. So let me give you an example. I can tell you to walk 100 meters straight in a straight line, or I can tell you to walk 100 meters in a straight line, but every 5 seconds you have to give me a lunge. And you have to do that the whole 100 meters, and every 5 seconds you have to give me a lunge. So as you can see, there's more parameters. First, it was just to go from 0 meters to 100 meters, and all you got to do is walk there. And then now the second example is that you're going from 0 meters to 100 meters, but every 5 seconds you have to give me a lunge. So as you can see, there's more parameters. And then you could increase the parameters by saying, in a third example, you have to walk 100 meters. Every 5 seconds you give me a lunge. Every 5 seconds you give me a lunge. And let's just say every other lunge, you have to also clap your hands twice. And I'm just making something up. You know, okay, so I'm walking. 5 seconds, down for a lunge, clap. Oh, no, I would just keep walking. Lunge, it's been 5 seconds. Now I do the clap, and then I go. So you see, even me explaining it, you could see that it's much more complex than me just going walk, right? It's just more, it's less complex. And I'm sure, or hopefully through my example, you'll notice that for somebody who maybe does the 0 to 100 meter walk, after doing it for some time, it would be absolutely boring. And then me doing what I just did, it reminded me of music. You know, let's just do it again, but let's just pretend it's like a song, right? Walk. Or let's say I did walk, lunge, walk, lunge, walk, lunge. And then you go the third one. Walk, lunge, walk, lunge, clap your hands, walk. You see what I'm saying? So it's almost like music is a perfect example. If you don't know shit about music, you've never practiced music, then I'm going to give you a drum set and I'm going to say just hit the kick. And that's it. I'm just going to want you to practice on that. But once you work on that for a little bit, do the kick and the snare, and then keep repeating that. And then you do that long enough, and then we'll tell you to add some other shit, you know? I'm just making this up, but hopefully it's becoming clear to you. And honestly, I feel like that was pretty damn good. I'm actually proud of myself for giving that kind of example and how I explained it, because I feel like that might be this could be helpful for someone who is trying to understand flow state, or for someone who was just interested, or maybe someone who wasn't even coming on this podcast because of flow state, but they were like, let me listen to Christian because, I don't know, maybe there's someone out there who enjoys me. I don't know. But anyways, I think that this could be of value to pretty much anybody. Why? Because it's a part of human nature that you will go into the flow state. I think it's inevitable that I think it's literally inevitable that you would never go into a flow state. Okay, let me make it clear. I think it's impossible to go throughout your whole life without ever getting into the flow state. I think it's impossible, like literally. Everyone goes through the flow state. The question is, can you get yourself into the flow state? Can you routinely get yourself into the flow state? You know, that's the real question. Now, will you ever get into the flow state? That's like, oh yeah, of course I'll get into it at some point. But can you routinely get into the flow state? And why would you even want to do that? And the reason why you might want to do that, the reason I like to get into it, is because you start to become so efficient, you're so productive, you're so effective, whether it's conversations, whether it's having a conversation, whether it's you drawing, painting, whether it's you just trying to accomplish a to-do list, whether it's you trying to do a morning routine, whether it's you, whatever it might be. I think being in the flow state makes you effective, I feel like it brings your passion out, because I feel like you can't be in the flow state without passion. I feel like when you get yourself in the flow state, you are by nature passionate about what you are doing, because I don't think you can get into the flow state either without any sort of emotion being involved. And I should probably set that as another foundation, along with there has to be some sort of focus. I think there also has to be passion involved. I don't think you get... Would you really ever get fully immersed in something if there was no passion to it? Like, I don't think so. Now, does that mean that you have to be passionate about doing that by doing, like, you might be washing dishes and you get into the flow state and you might tell me, well, I'm not passionate about washing dishes. That's true. So there doesn't necessarily have to be passion, but I think there has to be an interest in accomplishing the task. Maybe that's what it is. Because if you're washing dishes, you obviously have an interest to finish washing them. Otherwise, you wouldn't be washing them. And maybe you don't enjoy the process of washing them, but you enjoy having clean dishes, and that's enough passion for you to get through. So maybe passion is a foundation. And I've got 28 seconds before I hit the 20-minute mark. So I'm just going to start wrapping it up. I'm going to go past the 20 seconds, but I'm literally just wrapping it up. I'm not going to really add on to flow state. But I just want to say that is my quick 20-minute talk about flow state. I really do hope that somebody out there listening could possibly get a benefit from it, because I, for whatever reason, got really interested in flow state. I got really interested in flow state, you know, back when I kind of explained. And I think the idea of flow and flow state actually is a kind of phenomenon or topic or idea that's actually talked about in many different areas. Like, I feel like people talk about flow even if they're not using the word flow, is what I'm trying to say. Like, be patient, take it one step at a time, do it your way. You know what I'm saying? I think all these things in a way kind of have the idea of flow just entangled in there. You know, I just feel like flow is kind of an element to life that you just can't deny. And so I feel like maybe for a lot of people, flow state and kind of learning about the concept could actually be useful, because I think whether we're conscious of it or not, it's relevant in our lives. It's relevant in all of our lives. And maybe being conscious of how this phenomenon kind of works, it could, you know, you could use it to your favor. and ultimately live a more peaceful, passionate, compassionate life of your own. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you in the next one.